Welcome to the latest Hammer Horror in Order. I'm Josh. I'm joined here with Donnie
Yep.
and the Professor Smoke.
What's up?
We are from the All American Spook Show podcast, which you can check out right here on the YouTube channel or anywhere you get your podcast every Monday at 6 p.m. East. New episodes, generally without fail. It's been quite some time since we missed an episode or anything. So pretty much every Monday, 6 p.m. East. Come check us out. And of course, all the other cool stuff right here on our YouTube channel, other series, Video Vortex, Grindhouse Gutter, Traumatic Experience. They come out we've got something just about every week here on the channel, more often than not. So we encourage you to like and subscribe, click on the bell to be notified whenever new stuff comes up so you don't miss a thing. And we also encourage you to go check out aaspookshow.com. That's the center of the Spook Show universe where you can find our archives, our Patreon, patreon.com/aaspookshow. Lots of stuff. So this month, here on Hammer Horror in Order, where the premise of this, actually, I should get that out of the way, is that we're watching the Hammer Films horror/thriller library in the order, like the chronological order they were released. So we have finally worked our way up to the 60s. We are in the year 1960, finally here in the 11th edition of this program. And we are going to be talking about The Brides of Dracula from 1960. I guess, we'll get it out on Front Street. Donnie, had you ever watched this before?
I had not, no.
Smoke, what about you?
My second viewing, but my first viewing wasn't that long ago, 6 or 7 years ago, maybe.
I had never watched it up to this point myself either. So in that regard, it was kind of a treat. Like Donnie going in cold, not really knowing anything about it other than knowing the fact that Peter Cushing was in it and that it was a sequel to Horror of Dracula. That's what I knew going in. So I guess right out the gates, we should get over the fact that this is another Terence Fisher flick. This is another screenplay by Jimmy Sangster, right? Like that seems to be the recurring theme here on Hammer Horror in Order.
Right now, we're just adding this Terence Fisher wave out.
Yeah, and once again, Jimmy Sangster too. I mean, because like almost every other thing that we're watching was has his fingerprints on them as well. So we're on quite the run here with old Fisher and Sangster. But this one was also has screenplay credits for Peter Bryan and Edward Percy, and an uncredited writing credit for Anthony Hines. And of course, this is based on characters from the novel, by Bram Stoker, Dracula. So, but yeah, this is pretty much a direct sequel to the Horror of Dracula. So if you haven't seen the Horror of Dracula, you might want to pause this video here, go check that out, or at least go, watch our earlier on Hammer Horror and Order episode on that one, because by just by default you kind of have to get into a little bit of spoiler territory for that movie talking about this one, right? But because of the involvement or lack thereof of Dracula, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So, well, first off, that we talked about the screenplay. That was rewritten almost right as it was going into pre-production, and in a major way, because to address the, I guess, elephant in the room for anybody who knows this movie, or at least even if you haven't seen it and know a little bit about it, will know that Christopher Lee is not in it. The key player, Dracula, is not in the movie.
Yeah,
so
I went in cold, and I was just like, because I didn't look at any of the IMDb stuff. I didn't know it was. I mean, before I started watching that,
you didn't that Dracula is not in it.
No.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but like I said, we have to get into spoiler territory for Horror of Dracula in that there's a reason why, though. Remember from that one, right? Yeah. There's a reason he's not.
Yeah.
It won't be direct, but I think you can put two and two together as to why he may not be there.
Yeah.
But the real reason Dracula's not in this is because Christopher Lee decided he didn't want to do it. They had already written the story with Dracula in the story, and a way for him to, without again getting into spoiler territory on Horror of Dracula, there was a way they had written him into it. But he decided he didn't want to be typecast, so he didn't want to play Dracula, even though later on, a little bit later down the road, of course, he would come back to it for, I forget how many sequels, but quite a few. The next one being Dracula, Prince of Darkness, and I forget the year on that one, but that's when he shows up again. But at any rate, he had to rewrite it.
1966. So it'll probably be 6 more years for us before we get to that, just like it was in real life.
Yeah, so see, there you go, right there. It's like he didn't want to be typecast as Dracula. He'd already played Dracula. He'd already played Frankenstein's monster. He'd already played the Mummy. So I guess he was just not wanting to necessarily be typecast as the villainous monster role all the time, every time.
And that's the other thing too. If you think about it, like, you know, we're watching these every month in the order they were released chronologically. That's a pretty tight window where he's playing all these roles. You know, this is all like what 3 or 4 year period.
Yeah,
where he has been Dracula, Frankenstein, and the Mummy.
Yeah. So he was he's afraid of just getting typecast, so he decided not to do it. And I don't know if they'd already just written the story, just figuring he would do it, and then he said, "No, I don't want to." So they had, whatever the case, they had to go back to the drawing board as the movie's going into pre-production and basically write in the whole character of Baron Meinster. You know, that character wasn't in the original script, of course, because it was supposed to be Dracula. And then they called it, we're going to call it Disciple of Dracula, but I guess for some reason decided on Brides of Dracula. Although they could have called it Brides of Baron Meinster, but I don't think anybody would have seen it.
Yeah, probably not.
Although, I mean, we would have, because we would have had to.
Yeah, well,
yeah.
But you know, like I think that title works a lot better than Brides of Dracula here for the story. You know, because
it actually has a cool flow to it too. The Brides of Baron Meinster. You
know. Yeah, and probably a handful of years later, you know, that probably would have worked. They would have done it, but in this time, they're still trying to make bank on the name Dracula. So that's
you got to put butts in seats, man.
I think the Disciples of Dracula would have been a more appropriate title for the way this story played out, because it's called Brides of Dracula, and I guess there are Brides of Dracula in the movie to an extent, but not really. And the focus certainly isn't about them, right?
Yeah. The main focus is on Baron Meinster, and then, you know, him being, and I can't remember, I mean, I know that just reading about it, but I can't remember in the movie, does it mention that he became who he was because of Dracula?
I don't remember them saying directly this is how it happened. I think there were some explanations in there, but they were more like this Meinster family kind of like hobnobbed with people and partied and stuff, right? And then, like, you know, they mixed with the wrong crowd, so to speak, and then things happened. It's kind of the way it was described that I recall. So I think you put 2 and 2 together. They're like, they probably ran across him at some point, and that's how it happened.
Yeah.
Hobnob.
Yeah, I'm bringing Hobnob back.
For all the things to bring back, you bring back this one.
I will say this much: it took me some time to get into this one, because I knew about it. You know, I was somewhat cold, but I did know that Peter Cushing returned in this movie, so I was looking out for him. And I'm like, at one point, I'm like, damn, how long is this movie? He hasn't shown up. It was 31 minutes into the movie before Peter Cushing finally shows up. And it really goes from like mediocre to, okay, this is a lot better when Peter Cushing shows up, right?
Yeah.
Just his, well, I mean, he's got that charisma as an actor, especially for the role of Van Helsing and for all the, those types of roles he did. That, immediately you notice the energy level of the movie definitely rose up. So, and I looked at the, I was watching it on a streaming service. See, I noticed that too. Looked at the time mark whenever he popped up, and that's about the point, of course, when all the more vampiric activity starts happening too.
Because really leading up to that, it's more like just ominous. Like, something is coming, but nothing is really happening. Like this girl is in comes to town, and is kind of tricked into having to stay there, and then you're getting to know her and some other characters, and then you meet the Baroness Meinster and the Baron Meinster and all. There's this kind of intrigue type of thriller almost kind of thing going on. And then it once he shows up, then it becomes closer to the monster movie that you've come to, see, right? But
you get more you get more vampires for your buck, so to speak. I mean, even you don't get Dracula, but you get a bunch more.
Yeah, because if I recall, in the Horror of Dracula, you only got a couple of extra like vampires out of it, right? Like, I think he made a couple.
Yeah.
And then the main battle was between Van Helsing and Dracula in that one. And this one, you definitely get a few more, it seems like. And then like, once again, not to get too spoilery, but is there some lore change here in Vampire?
Yeah, there is a little bit of
the bite.
Well, yeah, the bite, and I think the well, you mean with the way that he handles it?
Yeah, like I don't remember ever seeing that before.
No, me either. Yeah, I like or hearing about anything like that from your traditional vampire folklore. No.
Yeah.
So I guess was it something they added, or just probably to give it more drama because that scene, like, oh shit.
Yeah. Well, damn,
Like,
I guess
okay.
that's the end of that. And then, okay, all right. They fixed it. Yeah.
Yep. But one other thing they kind of, well, that was maybe not in Horror of Dracula, the mirror thing. They never really addressed, that's been, of course, part of vampire folklore for I don't know how long, but for a long time of not having a reflection in a mirror or water or anything that gives a reflection. But they didn't really talk. They didn't talk about that in the first hand, Horror Dracula movie. I guess they didn't glossed over it. It's in the novel, I believe, but they didn't use it in the first Horror Dracula movie.
And they really played heavy on the cross in this one, it seemed like. Like, I know that's always part of the lore, but
yeah,
it seemed like that was like his main weapon. And
oh yeah,
various ways too, and it gets a little more creative at the end, right? But
yeah,
the cross play, using the cross against vampires really felt like that was like maybe not his only weapon, but like his main weapon here, because he only used the other stuff just a little bit,
yeah.
And you only got one staking.
True, yeah.
For me, overall, I think it was a pretty good flick, but it's nowhere near the level of Horror of Dracula. And really, out of the 11 now Hammer films that we watched, that's the fairest one to compare it to, because that's the only other like vampire horror or Hammer flick that we've watched. So, did you guys have any final thoughts before we give our consensus rating on it?
Yeah, it doesn't have Dracula. It doesn't have Christopher Lee. And it does maybe suffer a little bit from it, but not necessarily just because of the lack of Christopher Lee. I mean, the writings maybe, like you said, it takes to the middle part of the movie almost, or maybe not quite to the middle, but right before the middle, before Peter Cushing shows up as Van Helsing, and before, like I said, the vampiric activity really ramps up. So you got a little bit of a slow burn before that. But one thing you can say in this movie is, I think Jack Asher was the cinematographer, and it really, there's a lot of stuff to look at in this movie. It's really lush looking, the cinematography and the sets and all that stuff. Even maybe even more so than Horror Dracula, but that's not going to save the movie, or make it equal to Horror Dracula. But it is pretty to look at. Let's say.
Yeah, there's no doubt about the production quality in this one, and really, like since say the fourth or fifth Hammer movie that we've watched in the series here, pretty much since they kind of made that switch to color, at least, right? Or maybe even as far back as like obviously the Curse of Frankenstein, but Abominable Snowman and stuff like that. The cinematography in these movies, the production value, top notch of the time for sure.
Yeah,
your problems definitely aren't the way the things look. I wouldn't think.
Yeah,
and you talked about some of the rewrites and all that. That's probably what this one suffers from a little bit. It's just the fact that there were a couple of extra cooks in the kitchen, right?
Yeah, and they had to do it last minute, so to speak, right before it's going into production or into pre-production, and tacking on the Baron Meinster role, which I mean it fit well enough, but yeah, I'm sure it does suffer a little bit for that because it's not Dracula. It was supposed to be Dracula, and then that was just rewritten to add this added extra character into the storyline. So, but I mean, I don't think it was too intrusive the way it's written. It's just not. I'm sure it would have been better had it been the original, had it been filmed the original way with Christopher Lee.
Yeah.
And however it was, they were going to, like I said, I don't want to get too spoilery in here, but
yeah,
the way they would have had him be, from the conclusion of Horror Dracula, how that would have played out.
Donnie, do you think you would have looked at this any differently had it been, say, Dracula and Christopher Lee in this, with this basically the same story that you got?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it would have completely changed the my specific rating, because I mean, yeah, I did go in cold. I went, the first.
Wait, where the hell's Dracula?
Yeah, well, it's similar to what you said. The first half hour just drags, and you're just like, oh my god, it's just.
And that's it's an hour 30 movie, right? So like, third of the movie is just kind of.
Yeah, I'm just like, man, what is this?
Yeah,
what? Yeah, you almost feel bamboozled, in the the first half hour or so. But yeah, like if it had Christopher Lee, I mean, I think it would be a much better movie, a much different movie than what we got.
Yeah.
So.
And I think history has proven that out, because this isn't one that you hear people talking about. You do hear people talk about Curse of Frankenstein, Horror of Dracula, some others that we haven't got to.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't one you hear a lot of people talking about. So that, I think that's just the way it is when it kind of underperforms or is just underwhelming at the time. Yeah. It's probably not going to be remembered any more fondly than it was at the time,
Nope.
50, 60 years later. So
yeah, and you guys have already said it. Peter Cushing doesn't make it. Anything he's in, he certainly heightens the. This is not to say that if anything he saves the movie
absolutely.
For me.
Absolutely. Well, we came together beforehand and we discussed it a little bit so we could come up with the consensus rating, and that's what we do here. We have a 0 to 5 scale. We don't give stars, we give hammers. So we came together and we decided to give this a solid 3 hammers, which basically on our scale, as far as like the ones that we have watched up to this date, that puts it right on par with The Abominable Snowman from 1957 and The Hound of the Baskervilles from 1959. So I think on our scale that is, starting to get well developed now that this is the 11th Hammer flick that we've watched, I think that's a fair place to put it, kind of in the middle. It's not horrible, but it's not top notch either. It's watchable a time or two. Probably not something you're going to watch over and over again, but it's certainly not entry level Hammer for sure. This is more like you've watched a lot of Hammer and now you want to watch some more kind of thing. Like this wouldn't be. Don't start here.
Yeah, it would definitely be for, like you said, for people who are well versed with your average, your main Hammer titles. I think they would get some enjoyment out of it as long as they go into it knowing that Dracula himself's not in it.
Yeah, there's that too. Yeah. So yeah, that's where we'll leave it for this month. Next month, like we said earlier, we've got another Terence Fisher flick. It's crazy. The difference this time though is it's actually not written by Jimmy Sangster. This one is a screenplay by Wolf Mankiewicz. So we're going to be watching The Two Faces of Dr. Jekyll from 1960, aka House of Fright or Jekyll's Inferno. So this is all part of the stew of us heading toward the big time of year for us. This will be in September, September, October, into November and the holidays and everything. It's a big time of the year for us. So yeah, I'm looking forward to The Two Faces of Jekyll, or The Two Faces of Dr. Jekyll next month. It's like everything else we've got planned. So yeah, that's it for this month's Hammer Horror in Order. So stay tuned here to the YouTube channel for all of our other series. Like we said off the top, new episodes of the podcast come out every Monday at 6 p.m. right here on the channel or wherever you get your podcast. So for Will, who couldn't be with us, Donnie, Professor Smoke, I'm Josh, and we'll talk to you next month.